Welcome back to Tech Stack for all you tech enthusiasts. In this video, we will integrate POST and GET APIs in an Angular application. We will submit data using a template-driven form and display the saved data in a table. For both POST and GET operations, we will use APIs provided by HttpClient.io. Whenever we need to save records, we use a POST API. For GET APIs, we used JSON placeholder, which provides read-only data for testing. In this video, we will use HttpClient.io to perform POST operations. HttpClient.io is a free online service that lets you create mock REST APIs to store, retrieve, update, and delete data for testing and development. We have created a project named Angular to test our APIs. We have created an employee API with the fields ID, name, and department. This API is a REST endpoint that accepts employee data and returns a response. It uses the POST method. Its purpose is to create a new employee record. The data format is JSON, where we send employee details such as ID, name, and department in the request body. The API processes this data and returns the created employee record as a JSON response. Since it is hosted on Mock API, it simulates a real backend without actually running one, making it useful for testing and practice, not for real data storage. Open the integrated terminal inside the Pages folder and create a new component called Employee CRUD. Open approutes.ts and add a route for the Employee CRUD component. Open app HTML and add a link to the Employee CRUD component in the navbar. Open a new terminal and run the project using ngserve to verify that the component is working correctly. As you can see, the component is working perfectly. On this page, we will implement a complete CRUD operation. First, we will submit data using a POST API with a template-driven form. Then, we will display the data in a table using a GET API. Finally, we will perform delete operations with a delete API and update records using a put API. Now, we will use a template-driven form in the Employee CRUD component. First, create a class named Employee. Now, add the following fields to the employee class: ID as a number, name as a string, and department as a string. It's showing an error because the fields are not initialized. We need to add a constructor to initialize all the fields. Create a constructor in the employee class and initialize all the fields: ID, name, and department. Oops, we use commas instead of semicolons. Let's fix that. Now, create an object of the employee class. By using the new operator, the constructor is called and all the properties are initialized. Since we're using this class in the same component, no export keyword is required. If we create the class in a separate file, Then we must use the export keyword with the class name. Now, we will create the form HTML using ChatGPT. Open ChatGPT and provide the prompt to generate the form HTML. Design a Bootstrap 5 CRUD UI for employee management without body tags, Angular compatible. Use a 2-column layout with a table and a card on the left and an employee form and a card on the right. Don't worry, you can find the prompt in the video description. You can copy it and use it directly. As you can see, it has provided well-structured HTML. Let's copy it and paste it into the component's HTML file. Let's check the component in the browser. As you can see, the form and table are displayed neatly. Before moving ahead, as you know, Angular recently released Angular 21. We are covering Angular 21 from scratch, so if you're a beginner or intermediate, this series will be highly recommended for you. We have also provided the Angular 21 playlist in the description for easy access. Now, we will bind the template-driven form. Import Forms module in the Imports array to use the template-driven form. Now, we will bind each input field in the form using ngModel. Make sure each ngModel is linked to the corresponding property in the employee object. We are seeing an error because when ngModel is used inside a form, each input must have a name attribute. We can fix this by adding a unique name to each input field. Now, we will bind a function to the Form Submit button. This function will be called when a user submits the form to process and send the data. Create a function named onSaveEmployee to handle the form submission and save the employee data. Now, bind the onSaveEmployee function to the button's click event so it runs when a user submits the form. Now, inside the onSaveEmployee function, we will call the Post API to save the employee data. To integrate the API, first inject the HttpClient in the component. This allows us to make HTTP requests from the component. Now, make the Post API call inside the onSaveEmployee function. This will send the employee data to the API and create a new record. For getAPI, we only pass the URL, but for a Post API, we need to provide both the URL and the request body containing the data to be saved. Now, copy the API URL to use in the post request. Now, paste the copied URL into the post request. Now, add subscribe to the post request to handle the response. Now, inside the subscribe method, add the next callback to handle the successful response. Response returned by the API, we used any. We use any because the response can contain multiple properties and we are not strictly typing it for now. Now, add debugger statements in the onSaveEmployee function and inside the next block. This will help us pause execution and inspect the data for testing. Now, let's test the form and see if the Post API is working correctly. Open the browser's developer tools by inspecting the element. Enter some data in the form and click the Save button. As you can see, the data entered in the form is saved in EMP object as key value pairs. As you can see, the next block executed successfully, and the result contains the new object. The record has been inserted into the API. Now, we will integrate the Get API to display data in the table. We have already implemented the Get API in a previous video. You can find the link in the video description. First, add the ng-on init lifecycle hook in the component. This will allow us to load data automatically when the component initializes. Create a function named getAllEmployees to make the Get API call and fetch all employee records. Now, call the getAllEmployees function inside the ng-on init method so the data loads when the component initializes. Now, implement the Get API call inside the getAllEmployees function to fetch all employee records from the API. Use the same API URL for the GET request that we use for the POST request. Now apply subscribe to the GET request to handle the response and fetch the employee data. Now, add the next callback inside subscribe to handle the successful response from the GET API. Response returned by the API, we used any. We use any because the response can contain multiple properties and we are not strictly typing it for now. Now, create an array to store the fetched employee data. This will hold all the employee records returned by the GET API. Now, assign the API response residential to the EMP list array to store all employee records. Now, in the table, use forBlock to loop through EMP list and display each employee record. This will dynamically render a row for each employee in the array. Apply the tr tag to loop through EMP list and generate table rows for each employee. Now, add TD elements for ID, name, and department, and bind them to the corresponding properties of each employee. Use Angular interpolation to bind the employee data inside the table cells. Double curly braces automatically display the values of each property. Now, add delete and edit buttons in each table row. We will implement the delete and put APIs for these actions in the next video. This sets up the table for full CRUD functionality in the upcoming video. Now, remove any hard-coded table rows so that only the rows generated by for block are displayed dynamically. Now, let's test the table to make sure the employee data is displayed correctly. As you can see, the data is displaying correctly in the table. The GET and POST APIs are working. Next, we will implement the update and delete functionality. If you're passionate about learning new technologies, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Tech Stack, and keep learning new skills. Thank you. And remember, consistency is the key to success.